For decades, mainstream parties across Europe have kept extremist parties at arm's length, refusing to work with them, shutting them out of coalitions, and blocking their rise to power. This political firewall is known as the Cordon Sanitaire. But times are changing. In the Netherlands, the far-right PVV has broken through and entered government. In Austria, the Freedom Party has been in power before and nearly made it into power again after failed coalition talks with the center-right. And in France, President Macron's centrist camp has at times refused to endorse left-wing candidates in runoffs against the far-right National Rally, signaling cracks in the traditional stance against them. Yet in Germany, the center-right CDU-CSU is going against the trend, explicitly ruling out any cooperation with the AfD, even as other European countries ease their restrictions on far-right parties.
Es kommt eine Zusammenarbeit von uns mit der AfD nicht in Frage. Es kommt nicht in Frage und dabei wird es natürlich auch bleiben. Und Sie wissen das auch. Sie wissen das natürlich auch.
But is this approach still justified? Does keeping the Cordon Sanitaire in place protect democracy, or is it undemocratic in itself? That's exactly what we'll explore in this video. You see, things get complicated, fast. First, when is the Cordon Sanitaire actually applied? Mainstream parties interact with the far right or far left in different ways, and not all truly break the firewall. Some forms of cooperation are subtle, while others are direct political alliances. The first and most basic level is passive support. This is when mainstream parties don't officially work with the far right, but they accept their votes when it benefits them. We saw this just last month in Germany, when the CDU-CSU proposed a tougher migration policy. The FDP backed it, but so did the far-right AfD, giving the proposals enough votes to pass, at least the first time. That sparked a huge backlash, with many seeing it as the first crack in Germany's political firewall. The next level involves limited cooperation. At this stage, mainstream parties actively engage with far-right groups to secure political support without forming formal alliances. This can occur through informal negotiations on very specific policies. A more formalized step is the Confidence and Supply Agreement, also referred to as the Toleration Agreement. In this arrangement, a far-right party agrees to support a government in exchange for policy concessions, without holding official government positions. A notable example here is Sweden, where the right-wing Sweden Democrats back the minority center-right government, influencing policies on immigration and welfare, without being part of the official coalition. This setup allows mainstream parties to maintain power, while the far right gains influence from the outside. And then there's the real game changer, when a far-right party is brought into government through a coalition agreement. And this has already happened in Europe. In the Netherlands, Geert Wilders from the PVV won the largest share of votes in the 2023 election and joined a four-party coalition in 2024. However, despite his party being the strongest, Wilders himself did not become prime minister. Instead, a compromise candidate, Dick Schoof, was appointed. This shows that even when the far-right parties make it into government, there are still limits to how much power they can claim. And the final step? A far-right leader actually becoming prime minister or chancellor. This means that instead of just being in a coalition, the extremist party dominates the government and takes full control. Some argue that it's already happened in Italy, where Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy won the 2022 elections, and she is now prime minister. It's a scenario that could play out in more countries soon. In fact, it almost happened in Austria, but coalition talks have broken down. Now, the real question is, which of these levels actually break the Cordon Sanitaire? And perhaps more importantly, which one should be allowed to be broken? In Germany's case, public opinion was divided over whether breaking level 1, passive support, was a mistake. A slim majority believed it shouldn't have happened, but the debate remains heated. But here's where things get even more complicated. So far, we've only talked about Germany's federal level, but the government doesn't just operate at the top. There are multiple layers of power, from the national level to the regional state level, and then to the local level. And guess what? The firewall definitely is not as steadfast there than it is on the national level. Take the state of Saxony in 2022. where CDU representatives voted in favor of an AfD proposal to cut integration benefits for asylum seekers. Or look at Thuringia in 2023, where the AfD supported the CDU-CSU in pushing through a reduction in property transfer tax. Or just last year in 2024, where the CDU attempted a gendering ban in the German language alongside the AfD. But at the local level in German communes, cooperation is even more common. A recent study analyzed 2,400 municipal council meetings, where the AfD introduced 2,300 proposals. In almost 500 cases, researchers found direct cooperation, meaning at least one non-AfD representative voted in favor of an AfD motion, but about local infrastructure, transportation, sports, culture, and budget issues, where the traditional firewall seems to matter less. Nonetheless, at the state level, and especially at the local levels, levels 1 and levels 2 have already been breached, or at the very least, significantly weakened. Whether through passive support or limited cooperation, mainstream parties have in practice worked with the AfD. And now comes the million-euro question. Should mainstream parties work with extremists, or in Germany's case, the AfD? Now, before we dive deeper, we've got some very exciting news. We've officially launched the first version of our EU Made Simple shop. You'll find the link below, featuring cool hoodies and t-shirts. Perfect if you're looking for some awesome EU merch. Plus, it's a great way to support the channel and help us keep making content. But we don't just want to make merch for you. We want to make it with you. If you have cool designs, ideas, funny EU-themed concepts, or just something you'd love to see on a hoodie or a t-shirt, let us know. Drop your suggestions in the comments or reach out to us directly on Discord. So, what are the arguments for the Cordon Sanitaire, or so-called firewall? First, supporters say it stops extremist influence and protects democracy. They believe many far-right groups try to weaken institutions, control the media, and ignore the rule of law. By keeping a strict cordon sanitaire, democratic parties keep the system stable, even if it makes governing harder in the short term. Second, supporters argue that working with far-right parties normalizes their ideas, even if collaboration begins with minor policies. Once the firewall is breached, it becomes a slippery slope, and over time, people may stop seeing these parties as extreme, making their harmful ideas more accepted. This, they warn, could slowly weaken democracy and its core values. On the other hand, critics argue that the firewall is undemocratic. In a representative democracy, every party with significant support should have a voice. If a far-right party like the AfD wins 20% of the vote, but is completely excluded, millions of voters are ignored, which can undermine trust in the system and strengthen the idea that the establishment is silencing dissent. They also warn that blocking far-right parties fuels their outsider image, allowing them to claim they are victims of an unfair system controlled by the establishment. This can actually boost their popularity, as frustrated voters see them as the only real alternative. At the same time, keeping them out of power may push them to become even more radical, since they have no reason to moderate their views. And then there's political gridlock. Refusing any cooperation can lead to unstable coalitions and weak governments that struggle to function. Frustrated voters may turn even more toward the extremes, meaning the firewall designated to contain radical parties could actually help them grow. Honestly, I understand both sides of the argument, but I do believe that an overly aggressive firewall is risky, and it distracts from the real issue at hand. Let's take a step back. Should the firewall apply to everything, even at the lowest level? In Germany, for example, I feel like the real issue is getting lost. We've seen multiple terrorist attacks, and finally the CDU and CSU puts forward proposals to address migration. And then the AfD happens to support it in parliament, and suddenly there's nationwide outrage about the firewall being broken. But was there actual cooperation though? No. Plus, there's no coalition, no deal, just a vote on a policy. Is this really a violation of the firewall? Shouldn't the focus be on solving migration instead of finding new ways to enforce political isolation? I completely understand a firewall against full coalitions. But if a law is genuinely good and the AfD supports independently, does it really matter? My biggest concern is this. If Germany ends up with a gridlock coalition that gets nothing done, then the loudest defenders of the Cordon Sanitaire may face a harsh reality in 4 years. And AfD with a majority. Let us know what you think and whether the firewall should be applied everywhere or just on certain levels. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see the most likely coalition after the election, check out this video here. Or if you're curious about what the German Chancellor candidates want for Europe, watch this video here. And if you'd like to support our work, consider visiting our shop or joining us on Patreon. Your support is what makes our independent journalism possible. A huge thank you to our presidents, Jan, Sjoukje, Christian, Peter, HEVD, and BJ.